Good morning to you all. It is with great pleasure that I participate in this launch of the report on strengthening FDI and SME linkages in Portugal. I congratulate and show my appreciation and thanks to the OECD Secretariat for the collaboration and the work which is now being delivered. Thank you so much. It is a project in which the Portuguese government has been involved and welcomed the opportunity to launch this pilot. This is a very significant topic for economies across the globe, of course, but particularly in the stage of development and in the context of transformation that a country such as Portugal is facing. In recent years, in the last decade, the Portuguese economy has increased its degree of openness to the world. Exports have grown from under 30% of GDP to almost 45% of GDP in just a decade. Imports have, of course, increased, and the attraction of FDI has been very significant. We've also had a change in the approach we make to not only the strategy for attracting FDI, from trying to source investment, seeking lower costs of production on an industrial basis, to focusing on attracting and capitalizing other assets such as the talent and increased qualifications that the Portuguese population has been showing in recent decades. The other topic which we have been trying to ensure is that the spillovers of FDI investment into the economy at large is more widely spread and contributes to the overall increase not only of the national value added, but also the increase of productivity in other areas of our economic fabric, particularly SMEs. We have developed a very large scope of instruments to facilitate this, whether institutional, tax-wise, or regulatory, and they've used European structural funds to support the capacitation and the capacity of SMEs to participate in international value chains by linking with foreign investors. What we lacked was a systematic assessment of the impact of these policies, which could provide us with an overview of whether or not we are being successful in the goals we have been setting out, but also in making sure that we can calibrate exactly the policies, whether in reviewing the effectiveness of instruments and policies in place, or reviewing the governance aspects of where we stand. We thought that the outcome of this report is being particularly clarifying. It shows exactly and measures in a very objective way the impacts of foreign direct investments, of public policies which have been in place and adjusted, and thereby either confirming or infirming assumptions that we have made, and allowing us to better make use of the various instruments we have. We are extremely aware that for a country of such as Portugal, which needs to grow in the international value chains, which needs to participate in more complex value chains, which require much more productivity through innovation and use of qualified human resources to deliver the well-being and prosperity that the population has as a rightful ambition. We need to continue to use and being an attractive destination for foreign direct investment. The foreign investors have brought not only capital, but also access to markets, knowledge, and management capabilities, which have been extremely important. This report is, I believe, one of the most important instruments to which we have contributed, and for that I thank very much the OECD. And for that also I want to say that not only am I clearly satisfied with the results and the critiques that arise out of this report, but also I am extremely pleased that Portugal could be a pilot in this methodology and the launch of this instrument, which I believe will be of significant use for policymakers across the OECD. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Siza Vieira. You are the Minister of State for the Economy and the Digital Transition of Portugal. Thank you so much for starting and highlighting indeed the importance of this report for Portugal, and also I think as a very interesting case study for all OECD countries. I would like to give immediately the floor to the OECD Deputy Secretary General, Mr. Yoshiki Takeuchi. That is going also to share with us some comments and initial remarks. Please, Mr. Takeuchi, you have the floor.
Thank you, Minister Siza Vieira, Director General, Special Advisor, colleagues, and ladies and gentlemen. It's my great honor to welcome you to the launch of OECD review on strengthening FDI and SME linkages in Portugal. Let me first thank Minister Siza Vieira and the government of Portugal for their support in producing this review. I also want to thank the Portuguese and OECD team for their close partnership throughout, and the European Commission for their support and guidance. Portugal was severely hit by the COVID-19 pandemic due to its exposure to international trade and tourism and to high proportion of microfirms. GDP fell by 8.4% in 2020 compared to 4.7% on average in the OECD. Yet, strong policy support and the success of the vaccination campaign helped Portugal rebound strongly in 2021. The latest OECD forecast now projects GDP will reach its pre-crisis level in mid-2022. Looking ahead, however, the recovery in Portugal, like in many other OECD countries, remains fragile. The tourism sector continues to be affected by the mobility restrictions. Businesses face rising cost pressure from energy prices, supply constraints, as well as the need to repay loans built up during the pandemic. The strengths of the recovery hinge in part on the ability of Portugal's small and medium-sized enterprises to cope with these challenges and to seize the opportunities to bounce back and exit the pandemic, getting more resilient to the future shocks. The opportunities are there. Portuguese SMEs are responsible for almost 70% of value added and 60% of exports. Portugal's SMEs are also on average more innovative and digitalized than in many other OECD economies. This innovative SME sector and dynamic entrepreneurship ecosystem, combined with low labor costs and skilled workforce and good local infrastructure, have helped attract significant foreign direct investment in recent years. This also helped establish networks and partnerships between foreign multinationals and domestic SMEs. But not all the firms and places have the same ability to successfully integrate into these networks. Portugal has a large population of low productivity microfirms who have not seen the benefits of FDI inflows, which has been concentrated in Lisbon metro area and Norte. Microfirms in Portugal employ 40% of the all workers compared to 30% in the OECD. But these Portuguese firms contribute to just 25% of total value added. The review we are launching today aims to support Portugal in implementing public policies at national and subnational levels in order to foster stronger FDI and SME linkages. My colleagues will provide a comprehensive overview, but let me highlight 2 points. First, many efforts have been made by the Portuguese government to strengthen the SME absorptive capacities and to promote FDI SME partnerships and value chain linkages. Portugal has a comprehensive policy framework to foster collaboration between foreign firms and domestic SMEs. To ensure the effectiveness of these policies, they need to be monitored and evaluated more systematically. Second, as the review highlights, different areas within Portugal have distinct capabilities and opportunities. We especially looked at Norte and Alentezo, two regions with different economic profiles, SME sector structures, and FDI inflows. The review stresses the value of complementing national policies with policy-based approaches. It also notes the need to better align the Portuguese smart specialization strategies with policies relating to boost FDI, innovation, and entrepreneurship. We hope these and other recommendations provided in the review can support Portugal's effort to recover from the pandemic and to implement the Portugal 2020 national program. This review contributes to a multi-year OECD project supported by the European Commission to boost productivity and innovation in EU countries and regions. It also contributes to our FDI qualities initiative. This initiative will deliver a recommendation and policy toolkit for this year's OECD Ministerial Council meeting. The review also contributes to our mission to boost the ability of SMEs to attract FDI and to strengthen their role as part of more resilient global chains, networks, and partnerships. Ladies and gentlemen, building on existing policy efforts and support from the European Recovery and Resistance Facility, Portugal is well positioned to strengthen SME and FDI linkages and thereby to boost productivity and innovation during the recovery and after. We are looking forward to continuing our work with Portugal in the next phase of this program and under ongoing investment regulatory review. We would like to thank again the European Commission for their continued support. I look forward for the discussion today, and I thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Deputy Secretary General. So, Mr. Minister, Deputy Secretary General, thank you so much for your introductions. So I will start now the sort of more formally the launch of the OECD review on strengthening FDI and SME linkages in Portugal. I will have the pleasure of moderating this launch, this session. So my name is Joaquim Oliveira Martins. I worked for a long time at OECD, did a lot of things, and in particular, my last function was indeed in this great department that does work on SMEs and regional policy. I'm very happy also that we are dealing today with this study on Portugal. SMEs, of course, is very important, but very often is a sort of a blind spot of economic policy. SMEs very often don't have the scale, they're not enough engaged in international trade, they don't adopt enough of this new technology, so no scale, no trade, no technology. Very often they have a productivity problem, right? And SMEs are 60, even more % of our employment. This means that a very large share of employment in our economies may have a productivity problem because of that. So it's very important to understand and develop policies in order to address these questions. And I think this study brings very good news because it shows indeed that in Portugal there are a segment of SMEs that is becoming more and more intensive in technology, more and more integrated in international production chains, but also shows, of course, there is also still a large segment of the Portuguese economy which is a bit caught in a trap of low qualifications, very dependent of pure price competitiveness, and of course not enough engaged in the international linkages. So very important, I think, very important study. So this study is released as part of a broader cooperation, as the Minister and the Deputy Secretary General highlighted, a cooperation between the European Commission and the OECD on a project on strengthening FDI SME linkages and ecosystems. And very important, this study also is the first and will serve as a pilot study for further country assessments. And in particular, the OECD is already starting a similar review for the Slovak Republic. I would also like to highlight this cooperation between the OECD and the European Commission. So now I have the privilege and the honor of being a special advisor for the EU Commissioner for Cohesion and Reform. So I'm also very happy of this cooperation. And in particular, of course, this cooperation with the Director General for Regional and Urban Policy, who supports this project that aim to build for the capacity in countries to improve the qualities of the FDI, they attract, and to increase the productivity and innovation spillovers in the economy. I'm also just very quickly, that the Portuguese government is implementing, as established the Inter-Ministerial Task Force to support the implementation of the pilot country assessment. So this study will not remain in a shelf, will be appropriated by this task force. And of course, this question of interministerial cooperation and coordination is very important, because SME policy at the end is something that has to do with investment, regional policy, urban policy, innovation policy, and of course, SME policy. So very important that the Portuguese government is, in some sense, creating the institutions in order to offer this and implement this policy package. So just before I give the floor to the OECD team, I just would like to highlight some few housekeeping rules. So first, I would like to encourage the participants to engage in the discussion by submitting their comments and questions to the chat function of the Zoom platform. I also would like to inform that we will have a short open discussion session at the end of this virtual event. I hope we will have enough time indeed to have this sort of interaction part, and this will take place after the presentation by the OECD and remarks by the European Commission and Portugal. So I will hope that we have this sort of a buffer at the end, but of course the timekeeping will be very tight. And I would like to immediately give the floor to the great OECD team that prepare this report. So Sandrine Cadroac and Stratos Kamenis, that are going to present the main highlights and conclusions from this report. So Sandrine, Stratos, you have the floor, please.
Merci beaucoup, Joachim. Let me share my screen. Okay. Can you see the screen?
Yes, it's working. Yes. It's working
okay.
Perfectly.
Super. So, merci beaucoup, Joachim, Mr. Minister, Deputy Secretary General, colleagues and friends. This is a real pleasure for me to introduce this session. The Portugal review that we will present today is the first outcome of a multi-year project conducted by the OECD in cooperation and with support of the European Commission DG Regio. The report, the project, aims to support EU countries and regions in building stronger linkages between foreign direct investment and small and medium-sized enterprises in order to boost productivity and innovation. We are currently working on developing a policy toolkit and policy recommendation for governments at national and subnational level to create the condition and incentive for strengthening these FDI and SME linkages and the potential for spillovers. The issue and the work we are doing with Portugal are particularly timely because the COVID-19 crisis had a strong impact on global value chain, deeply disrupting trade, supply chain, and international investment. Economies and enterprises are still facing difficulties related to product shortage, trade disruptions, and rising prices. But the crisis has also revealed some vulnerability and raised the question of how to achieve greater resilience, especially in the context of a possible reconfiguration of these global value chains. The pandemic has reignited a policy debate around the role SME could play in the smart specialization of countries and places and the optimization strategies of multinationals. And at the same time, there is a growing attention given by government and the private sector to sustainable investment and how FDI and the qualities of FDI could contribute to sustainable development goals. So this project is unique as it bridged two policy communities together, the investment and the SME and entrepreneurship policy communities, through the OECD Committee on Investment and the OECD Committee on Small and Medium-Sized Enterprise and Entrepreneurship. It also involved consultation and knowledge sharing with the third committee, the OECD Committee on Regional Policy Development. And it's also unique as per the multidisciplinary team it brought together. And here I would like to acknowledge my colleagues Martin Vermeulinger, who co-lead this project with me. So what did we do? We have identified 4 types of SME and FDI linkages through which productivity and innovation spillovers can take place. First, value chain linkages. SME and foreign affiliates are linked through buyer and supplier relationship, and knowledge and technology transfer can take place during the trading activities or as part of them. Second, strategic partnership, and often these partnerships are implemented around innovation activities, whereby SMEs and multinationals develop content, such as R&D jointly, or cooperate on commercialization. Third is labor mobility, when staff from foreign affiliate move to an SME or set up a company locally, or the way around, when local staff are hired by a multinational. And last but not least, are market mechanisms related to competition and imitation. So good practices and innovation are adopted as part of a broader innovation diffusion. How efficient this channel of diffusion could be, of course, will depend on a number of enabling conditions. First, the potential of FDI spillovers that this investment could bring, which is related to the nature and the knowledge intensity of this investment. Then, of course, the SME absorptive capacity and the existence of a local entrepreneurial ecosystem that could ease and incentivize innovation. And last, some structural aspects related, of course, to economic structure, economic specialization, and economic geographic factors. And as you may see, all these channels and these conditions are actually at the crossroad of different policy domains. Investment and SME and entrepreneurship policy, of course, but also innovation and regional development policy. This means that we have a broad range of policy instruments that could be relevant and mobilized to foster these linkages between FDI and SME and create this condition and incentive for spillovers. This means also a very complex mix of initiative and institution involved. And this is the reason why a strong emphasis we have placed on this work is on policy coordination and multi-level governance, and more broadly on coordination across these different domains. So now I would like to leave the floor to Stratos Camini. We did a great job in coordination this review, and we'll present you some findings of the review, as we don't have time to present everything in detail. So Stratos, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sandrine. We will start the presentation of the findings by looking at the enabling conditions and the channels for FDI spillovers on Portuguese SMEs. First of all, we find that the potential for FDI spillovers in Portugal is strong. Portugal has so far attracted significant FDI in export-oriented manufacturing, which was motivated by low labor costs, strong R&D skills, and good infrastructure. FDI is also concentrated in sectors with higher average labor productivity and higher R&D intensity levels relative to the rest of the economy. Foreign firms tend to be on average more productive than Portuguese firms. This productivity premium means that there is strong potential for knowledge spillovers to take place. Despite the rising importance of FDI, there is still potential for further growth, especially in high-tech manufacturing and services. Key indicators such as value added, export shares, and FDI stocks relative to GDP still remain below those of peer EU countries. Turning to SMEs, Portuguese SMEs show good absorptive capacities overall, being relatively more innovative and internationalized than those in many other OECD economies. They are more often engaging in product and process innovations. They're also more engaged in trading abroad, often within long value chains. Portugal has a vibrant startup and entrepreneurial ecosystem, as shown in increasing numbers of firm creations in recent years. The country also offers a good environment for entrepreneurship. The administrative burden on startups is relatively low as per OECD standards. This highlights a good potential for resource reallocation towards high-performing firms and favorable market conditions. Portugal has, however, a large population of low productivity microfirms compared to other EU countries. Microfirms with less than 10 employees, in particular in less developed regions. These firms have lesser capacity to engage with foreign firms in knowledge-intensive collaborations, something which might affect the potential for FDI SME linkages and spillovers differently across regions within the country. Now, turning to the diffusion channels, domestic SMEs have built value chain linkages and strategic partnerships with foreign investors. These linkages and partnerships are major channels through which knowledge spillovers take place in Portugal, while there is less evidence of the role that other channels, such as labor mobility and competition, could effectively have. In general, foreign affiliates source extensively from local suppliers, especially in high-tech manufacturing and lower technology services. Domestic firms also seem to benefit significantly from quality inputs produced locally by foreign affiliates, as well as inputs from foreign firms abroad. Strategic partnerships, on the other hand, are prevalent mostly among medium-sized firms in the manufacturing sector. Overall, there is still potential to strengthen SME integration in innovation networks that could offer learning opportunities and market access for these SMEs. This review also includes an assessment of Portuguese institutions, as Sandrine mentioned earlier, institutions in charge of fostering FDI SME linkages. Portugal's governance framework involves several public institutions. There are 4 implementing agencies working on investment, SME, innovation, and regional development policy, reporting to different line ministries. As compared to other EU countries, such as, for example, Slovenia, that you can see in the slide, which have a simpler institutional setup, this fragmentation could potentially give rise to information asymmetries and transaction costs. And for this reason, policy coordination, ensuring policy coordination must be a priority. Currently, coordination in Portugal takes place through 3 high-level councils, although they do not always have the capacity and resources to foster synergies. Interagency collaboration through joint programming, on the other hand, is frequent and effective. Such collaboration is also increasingly taking place with subnational governments, which have been given significant responsibilities on investment and SME policy, and play an important role in the implementation of smart specialization strategies. The recent transfer of responsibilities to subnational governments should also be matched with the appropriate financial resources. Our recommendations on the governance framework focus on 4 main issues. First of all, ensuring policy coordination by strengthening the resources and mandates of these 3 high-level government councils, further encouraging interinstitutional collaboration at the national and subnational levels, in particular with regional authorities and municipalities, strengthening the analytical capacities of key agencies that work on investment promotion and SME policy so that they can monitor and evaluate the effectiveness of their programs. And finally, continuing efforts to engage foreign firms and local SMEs in policy dialogue. Now, turning to the policy incentive system, the policy mix that we mentioned as part of our conceptual framework, based on a mapping of policy initiatives implemented in EU countries, we have developed some experimental indicators that show how much policy emphasis goes to different objectives, to the different objectives of our conceptual framework. We see here that the Portuguese policy mix focuses very much on strengthening SME capacities and promoting value chain linkages and partnerships. Overall, the policy mix places emphasis on knowledge co-creation between business enterprises, universities, and R&D organizations. Similarly, investment promotion and SME development policies have a strong focus on knowledge and technology intensive activities. This is particularly the case for investment incentives, and other financial support schemes. The quality of the knowledge transfer infrastructure has also significantly improved in recent years over the past decade. Many collaborative laboratories and technology transfer offices have been established around Portugal. These infrastructures have so far allowed foreign affiliates and domestic firms to collaborate on specific projects. Such collaborations have been also promoted through programs that target FDI SME ecosystems as a whole, such as the supplier clubs run by the Portuguese Investment Promotion Agency. Finally, efforts to improve SME access to finance have also intensified in recent years with the launch of several state-backed financing instruments, co-investment programs, and the recent establishment of a national promotional bank. Now, our suggestions to improve the effectiveness of the policy mix include, first of all, structuring FDI promotion policies into support packages that target different types of FDI and accommodate the needs of different investors, from large investors to innovative foreign startups. Expanding the presence of technology transfer offices to less developed regions to ensure that SMEs with lower capacities have access to resources, information, and technical assistance. Leveraging the new National Promotional Bank to facilitate access to finance for SMEs. And finally, ensuring that SMEs and foreign affiliates in sectors of strategic importance for the Portuguese economy have access to collaborative incentive schemes and supplier development programs. Now, as we mentioned at the beginning, the last chapter of the report also looks at the potential for FDI SME linkages in the two regions of Norte and Alentezo. The two regions are distinctively different. Norte is a larger, younger, more industrialized region. Alentezo, on the other hand, is a remote, traditionally agricultural location in close proximity to the capital, Lisbon. Although both regions have experienced an increase in innovation performance over the past decade, domestic firms in Alentezo have weaker connections to global knowledge networks and perform less R&D than Norte and the rest of Portugal. Most FDI is also concentrated in the Lisbon area and the Norte region, which means that knowledge spillovers on other regions are limited. These regional trends and these regional characteristics stress that space-blind policies in Portugal will not be as effective to address these disparities in FDI attraction and SME development. Policy considerations should therefore be given to balancing national and local priorities and taking into account regional heterogeneity when devising new policies and programs. As mentioned earlier, such an approach would also benefit from enhanced collaboration at the local level between municipalities, regional authorities, and the subnational branches of the main implementing agencies. This is the end of our presentation. Thank you for your attention, and we look forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Sandrine. Thank you, Stratos. Extremely clear presentation, the relevance of the conclusions, the usefulness of the guidelines, recommendations. And I find also this case, this contrast between the northern region and Alentejo illustrates very well also this sort of transition where the Portuguese economy is, the kind of duality between more dynamic segments of the enterprise sector and the economy and other segments of the economy which are still a bit lagging and need this adjustment. So extremely interesting. Thank you so much. I would like now to give the floor for reactions to the European Commission and to the Inter-Ministerial Task Force of Portugal. So perhaps we should start with the European Commission, and I would like to give the floor, a pleasure to give the floor to Catherine Wendt. Catherine is head of the unit for smart and sustainable growth of the Directorate General for Regional and Urban Policy of the European Commission. So Catherine, you are connected? Yes, hello. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Joachim. Thank you, Chair. First of all, of course, let me thank the colleagues in the OECD for their excellent work on this report, which has been very clearly now presented to us. This is the first tangible result of our common project on linkages between foreign direct investments and SMEs that we started in 2019. And I also want to thank at the beginning the Portuguese authorities for their very full engagement and excellent cooperation on this project during all stages of the work. But let me now move to my reaction, and I'd like to start that by sharing some reflections on why the project is important for us in the European Commission. So when we were preparing the project, we had several things in mind. First, of course, the importance of SMEs for the EU economy. Europe's SMEs employ around 100 million people, account for more than half of Europe's GDP, and make up 99% of the EU's businesses. They're the backbone of Europe's economy, but they face many challenges that we have heard in accessing finance, the uptake of innovative technologies, or in accessing information and skilled employees. And this is why they are at the center of cohesion policy support and why we are seeking ways to help SMEs find opportunities across Europe and beyond. The participation of SMEs in value chains can offer such opportunities. Value chain participation allows SMEs to increase productivity and to expand their business. This is often achieved by the upgrading of their technological and human capital as a result of their greater exposure and increased access to information, new business practices, and more advanced technologies. However, SMEs' involvement in value chains also entails greater demands on their managerial and financial resources and greater pressure on their ability to upgrade and to innovate. The project should increase our knowledge on how targeted support programs put together by national or regional governments are addressing specific needs of SMEs to enter and upgrade their value chain participation, and make specific recommendations on what type of support may be the best in different conditions. The second thing to mention about the project is the importance of value chains for the EU economy and for EU autonomy. The EU owes much of its economic weight to its regional value chains and their integration into the global market. However, the COVID-19 pandemic, which we've of course already referred to, which started just a few months after the project began, exposed many vulnerabilities in the way current global value chains operate, and showed what impact disruptions in deliveries of essential goods and inputs have on society and the economy. The pandemic clearly highlighted that the EU needs to strengthen the resilience of its economy, rethink its approach to value chains, and deepen business relations among European companies and partners. We need to boost the European industrial ecosystem and reduce overdependence on third countries for certain strategic products. I'd like to recall that it was the Portuguese presidency of the Council of the European Union in 2021 that made it a priority of the EU to defend Europe's autonomy by developing a dynamic industrial strategy that promotes European value chains and pays attention to strengthening small and medium-sized enterprises and the sectors worst hit by the crisis. The third aspect to look at are the radical changes in the way global value chains will have to operate. Again, the crisis rapidly accelerated the digitalization of the economy, and there is a growing need to tackle the challenges brought about by climate change. We are therefore focusing our efforts to develop value chains that are more digital, greener, and sustainable, and at the same time remain competitive at the global level. This project is a direct contribution to these efforts. A fourth consideration, very concretely, is that the project and its outcomes are important for our understanding of the specific local conditions of FDI SME linkages. We know, and the report shows it again, that governments play an important role in the management of value chains, and that the policy mix for FDI diffusion is crucial to maximize the impact of FDI for local economic development. To make the most of FDI, all EU regions need the same: to advance knowledge on MNE-SME linkages, share good policy practices, and build capacities to effectively coordinate and target the relevant policies at the national and regional level. The analysis then made for Portugal will have a broader impact in that respect. It will directly feed into a policy framework highlighting the channels through which FDI can enhance SME productivity and innovation at local level in different contexts. And it will show policymakers in different EU and OECD countries how they can act through appropriate policies, regulations, and institutions to maximize the benefits of FDI presence in their territory. Let me now share with you some comments on the report itself. We see that it shows really an excellent analysis of the existing key enabling conditions for FDI spillovers on SMEs in Portugal, and many valuable insights on current strengths and weaknesses linked to these conditions. We very much welcome the policy findings and recommendations, along with the concrete suggestions on how to improve the current situation and what policy initiatives to prioritize in the future. We were very happy to learn that some of the recommendations from the report are being addressed under Portugal's Recovery and Resilience Plan, and we hope that the report will be useful also for the preparation of the new generation of cohesion policy programs that we are currently negotiating. Several recommendations, in particular those targeting support for SMEs, seem to be particularly relevant for the cohesion policy operational programs, such as the need to address existing regional disparities in relation to knowledge transfer services and infrastructures provided to SMEs, and the need to focus on upskilling and reskilling programs that could help SMEs access qualified human capital. These really go hand in hand with our priorities for SME support in the next programming period. So let me conclude. As I mentioned at the beginning, this report on Portugal is the first result of our cooperation with the OECD. And as we have already heard, the next country where we're piloting the policy framework is Slovakia. And we're of course looking forward to seeing the results of the work there. We have also recently agreed with the OECD to expand the work to more countries and to look more closely at innovation diffusion and FDI SME ecosystem reliance after the COVID-19 pandemic. I'm also happy to mention that the work on FDI in Portugal will continue with the support of the European Commission. We are beginning with the OECD and the Portuguese authorities a new project that will look into the impact of regulation on FDI in Portugal and possible needs for structural reforms. This goes in line with the recommendations made in our report, and we're happy to see that this work is being taken forward. So many thanks again to the whole OECD team for their excellent work. We are very much looking forward to continuing our common work on this project. Thank you very much, Chair and colleagues.
Thank you so much, Catherine. You know, at the OECD in the Regional Development Policy Committee, we always said that the regional and urban policy is a policy of policies, right? And so I think it's very important indeed that the Director General in charge of regional and urban policy is so concerned about these linkages with all the policy lines, FDI policy, SME policy, innovation policy, etc. This at the end will really make the difference in terms of the quality of the regional and the urban policy. Thank you so much, Catherine. So now I would like to give the floor to the Inter-Ministerial Task Force of Portugal. We have the responsibility to, in some sense, lead, coordinate the different steps of the implementation of the recommendations of this report. So we'll have three interventions. First, José Pedro Salgado is Senior Officer in the Directorate General for Economic Activities. Then Pedro Silinho is the Head of the Business Capacitation Unit in the IAPME, which is the Support Institute for Small and Medium-Sized Companies and Innovation. And then Rui Inácio. Rui is Director of the Regional Policy Unit from the Agency for Development and Cohesion of Portugal, with which, by the way, we see there's many linkages, and in particular, I think Duarte Rodrigues, who is a senior person in this agency, is also the representative of Portugal in the Regional Development Policy Committee of the OECD. So, Pedro, let's start with you. I give you the floor immediately. Pedro? José Pedro.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Allow me to begin by reinforcing the thanks and acknowledgements that have already been made to the OECD team, and allow me just to name in particular Martin, Stratos and Sandrine for their great cooperation throughout these 2 years, as well as of course to the European Commission for funding and for supporting this project. I would also, of course, like to thank the members of the task force at the national, regional, and local levels, without whose efforts this work would, I think, quite literally been impossible. And I would particularly like to thank my colleague Ana Costa Paula from the GAI and to ADNC in the person of Rui Inácio for their invaluable contribution to the regional component. Now, moving on to the subject at hand, many points in the report have highlighted the positive results of the overall investment policy pursued by Portugal, including the presence at a basic level of the solid economic fundamentals and of an entrepreneurial ecosystem that promotes FDI, especially in the wake of the pandemic. It's also remarked that our sustained effort of internationalization of the economy has borne some fruits. Being open is absolutely essential for a medium small economy such as Portugal, and this has consistently been a guiding principle for our actions. This openness is made through the attraction of FDI, where Portugal has bet on the competitiveness of its citizens in terms of skills, but also in terms of the legal, financial, and physical infrastructure available. But the usefulness of the report lies mostly not in our strength, but in our points of improvement. One of these is the element of skilled, competitive citizens. In spite of the fact that Portugal distinguishes itself by attracting efficiency-seeking firms also at the higher technology level, including service activities, we would also need to continue to encourage the next step of this evolution up the value chain into technology exploiting FDI, which is not only shown to have the highest FDI spillover potential, as the report states, but it's also the way towards more value-added activities. One of our strong points is the resilience of investment inflows in spite of the pandemic, which can still be reinforced by means of diversification. The report does make an important point that to some extent, immediate FDI may not reflect the ultimate source of FDI, as is suggested by the relatively high share of FDI incoming from Luxembourg, 20%. And this whole idea is, of course, part of a larger point that the more diverse and internationalized FDI stocks are, the more they can resist crises, such as the one that we're living at the moment. I would say that one of the most interesting points in the report has to do with the coordination at the institutional level, which is in fact one of the main principles that is most evident throughout the development of the FDI qualities toolkit, and in comprising both horizontal coordination at the national level and vertical coordination from the national to the local level. The report highlights that while Portugal has an institutional division that is made essentially by policy area, the choice for a less centralized institutional approach is not necessarily less effective in the implementation of FDI policies. And the proposals within the report to improve the interinstitutional coordination make specific and very useful suggestions, especially some of which the report acknowledges already exist in the implementation of certain national programs, and others which can build upon efforts already made in the creation of joint programs or of government task forces, along with the existing high-level advisory councils. Finally, allow me just to stray a bit from the substance of the report to highlight the importance of the process in itself. Important as the recommendations within this document are, there is, of course, also a significant added value in the exercise and in the asking of the questions. On our part, the internal reflection and consultation exercise, which this cooperation with the OECD has allowed us to make, was also very useful, not only because it has given us the chance to ask certain questions which we would not necessarily have come up, which should not necessarily have come to us, but also because it has given us the chance to cooperate in the answers. And I believe it has opened new avenues of future policy and institutional work. Therefore, we look forward to working with the OECD and the European Commission in the future application of the FDI Qualities Toolkit. Thank you for your attention, and I would now give the floor to my colleague from IAPME, Pedro Silinho. Pedro, please.
Thank you, Pedro. Thank you all. Before starting, I would like to greet all the attendees and the panel colleagues and thank the General Director of Economic Activities for the invitation to IAPME to speak about the importance of this topic for Portuguese SMEs. IAPME, as stated before, is the agency of the Ministry of the Economy that is in charge of implementing policies for the competitiveness of SMEs and works with a vast list of affiliates like the Banco de Fomento or the National Innovation Agency, among others. So, as stated before, in the recent past, Portugal has attracted a significant flow of foreign direct investment of multinational enterprises, mainly in export-oriented manufacturing. This has supported the creation of value chain networks involving foreign firms and domestic SMEs, and increasing also the opportunities for spillovers on the economy. This happens because foreign firms are often more productive than domestic ones due to greater access in technology, better managerial skills, and more resources for capital investments. And these capacity differences make it possible for SMEs to benefit from the knowledge technology transfers. Foreign firms also source inputs from local SMEs and help them extend their market by raising the competitiveness of their outputs. This allows also SMEs to access other global value chains, increasing the willingness of foreign firms to share knowledge and technology with domestic SMEs. This study reveals several relevant characteristics of FDI in Portugal. Foreign firms source more extensively from domestic firms, mainly SMEs in Portugal, when compared to affiliates in other economies. The share of local sourcing of foreign firms in Portugal is comparable with very competitive economies like Korea, Finland, Switzerland, or the Netherlands. And and foreign firms source more from Portuguese firms in average than in other OECD economies. So also local firms also engage in collaboration with foreign firms, which deepens the technology transfer opportunities and supports performance improvement. But of course, different types of SMEs have different chances to enter in collaborations with foreign firms and to benefit from these spillovers. And this happens because SMEs have differences in what is called absorptive capacities, which is the ability of a firm to recognize new knowledge and integrate it in its business. This is why the strengthening of SMEs' absorptive capacities and promoting strategic partnerships is one of the main objectives pursued by our policy mix. Incentives for R&D and innovation, technology acquisition, digital transformation, and SMEs capacitation have been major instruments used to strengthen the SME absorptive capacity and promoting partnerships in the development of products and services through business-to-business and science-to-business collaborations. Maybe this is one of the reasons why Portuguese SMEs contribute significantly to value added and exports, and are relatively more innovative and digitized than those in many other OECD economies. This also means that capacities of SMEs in these activities are already well developed to absorb knowledge and technologies from foreign affiliates. However, the study stresses that Portuguese SMEs remain weakly integrated into innovation networks on average when compared to SMEs in other OECD economies. Although their relative good performance in respect to innovation, outcomes, and digitalization. This means that intensification of collaboration between SMEs, foreign firms, and research and technology organizations can strengthen the potential of FDI spillovers and can also increase the resilience of local firms. This happens because collaboration allows access to resources and competencies from various entities, overcoming individual limitations of SMEs, and also develops the absorptive capacity in face of external knowledge. But only continuous collaboration allows to develop this value, the value of the company as a partner, and deepening the collaboration as it occurs when it generates positive results. And for example, the Suppliers Club initiative that combines matchmaking services to help foreign and domestic firms identify collaboration opportunities and agree on jointly implemented projects should be expanded as recommended to additional sectors of strategic importance for the Portuguese economy. One of the developments of this initiative is the Mobilizing Agendas for Business Innovation initiative, included in the Portuguese Recovery and Resilience Plan, leveraging the collaborative development of new products, services, and solutions with high added value and incorporation of knowledge and technology. This already allowed us to identify 64 potential mobilizing agendas involving over 9 billion euros of investment by consortia of large companies, many of them foreign firms, SMEs, and research and development organizations. I believe that the policy trends for the future should have a specific focus on developing and encouraging collaboration between foreign firms resulting from FDI and other large companies with SMEs involving also research and technology organizations. Thank you all. I would like now to pass the floor to Rui Inácio from the Agency for Development and Cohesion. Thank you.
Thank you, Pedro. And once again, let me start to thank the OECD for this study, which is coming in the right time when we are developing the programming exercise of the next cycle of European funds for 2021 and 2027. So the valuable conclusions and recommendations coming from this report will surely be taken into account in that exercise. I would like to focus my short remarks on the report on the importance of regional focus to put in place a policy mix that can provide the right conditions to attract FDI, namely that FDI linked to regional, more linked to regional presence and potential capabilities. As stated in the report, regional rather than country-specific factors are determining the investment choices by multinational companies. To answer to the challenges identified in the report, the link between FDI and the SME development in Portugal could be reinforced. It is important to complement a more nationwide approach as presented by my colleagues Pedro and José Pedro, with a place-based approach, focusing in using the endogenous characteristics of each territory and also their undisclosed potential. It is also important to note, as it is already mentioned before by other speakers, that the European funds represent play an important role to the implementation of the regional strategies that are behind these policy mixes that could lead to the exploitation of this unlocked regional potential. It is important to note that in those strategies, smart specialization strategies, which are now assisting a second generation of for its implementation, play a central role as providers of the right framework of action needed to be, which needs to be permanently developed to unlock the potential of each region. These strategies are important tools to promote a dynamic relation between different actors, public administration, firms, academic institutions, researchers, providing the room for fine-tuning the public policies measures needed to boost economic development of each region. These strategies are also important to focus simultaneously on areas where regions has comparative advantages, as well as on areas where regions, as well as in order to promote an entrepreneurial discovery process for permanent finding of new interconnected areas of diversification and competitive advantages that could lead the regional development of the development of each region. This action is based in a policy mix. The action promoted by those smart specialization strategies is based in a policy mix that ranges from direct incentives to firms to regulatory practices, which should be tailor-made to the specificities of each territory. Let me highlight 3 areas of that policy mix which could be essential to answer to the identified weaknesses of the FDI SME linkages, which are stated in the report. Those areas of the policy mix, which in my view are more important, or could be more important to promote, to reinforce the linkages between FDI and national SMEs, are the strengthening of regional innovation systems, namely enhancing the linkages between academic and research institutions and firms, the investment in skills, upgrading the level of qualification and skills of active population and preparing it to new fields of specialization, namely aligned with green and digital transitions, as well as investing in the qualification of firms to be part of innovation networks and international networks promoting their inclusion in the global value chains. And last but not least, improving where needed the network of public infrastructures so the different regions can be better integrated on, on global value chains, namely in what deals with the digital economy. At the same time, this development of these conditions in the context of the smart specialization strategy should help to identify the areas where FDI is more needed and where it plays a more important role for regional competitiveness and regional development. In this sense, it is important to note that the implementation of these strategies could also be important and be part of a FDI attraction strategy, which could be more focused on the search for some FDI inflows that are more focused on the areas needed for each region, and that could be also at the same time more selective to each region. To conclude, the ability to promote the right investments in those public goods which could provide the right context conditions to attract FDI, aligned with both the needs of investment of each region, as well as reinforcing the areas of smart specialization of each region, are key to their development and should be at the core of their policies in the coming years. Thank you.
Thank you so much, so José Pedro, and Rui for your comments and reactions to the study. We have now a bit of time for perhaps a bit more interactive part of this meeting. I saw that there was already some interaction between Isabella and Martin from the OECD team on the question of absorptive capacity. This is very important, of course, because it's not only the question of having foreign direct investment, is the capacity, of course, locally to absorb this type of investment, having the right human capital to make use of this sort of knowledge, ensure that there are spillovers, etc., etc. So this question of the absorptive capacities is very important. I would perhaps just add in this line a question about when we think about FDI. It's true that very often we think about multinational companies. After all, multinational companies control, influence 60 to 80% of international trade through these global value chains. So this relationship with big multinational companies is very important. The attractivity of the country with these companies is very important. But on the other hand, sometimes it's not easy. You need to have a sort of strategy to deal with these big global sort of entities. There are some interesting studies, for example, from the London School of Economics, on the issue that actually the FDI from smaller companies, even from small and medium-sized companies in other countries, can also actually be a very interesting type of international relationship of internationalization. So I'll just kind of leave this question to the OECD teams, perhaps at the end. How do you see this relationship with first these very big entities like the multinational companies and perhaps other type of companies in the kind of effectiveness of the FDI to create these spillovers locally in the economy? I think that there are two people, Daniela Ruda Benjamin, she's from Brazil, and Piotr Kraczowiczyk, I don't know if I pronounce well, from Poland. Are they connected? They want to intervene to raise questions. Daniela or Piotr? Are they connected or not? They are connected? Piotr?
Yes.
Oh, go ahead, Piotr. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you very much for giving me the floor, and many thanks to the OECD team and the Portugal for organizing this event. It's great to hear your experiences with fostering these interlinkages between FDIs and SMEs, because attracting FDI is one thing, but another one big step is to build this and maximize the impact on the national economy and also for the regional level as well. So it was great to hear from you, and actually I had a question also related to the fostering absorptive capacities of Portuguese SMEs, and I would be happy to learn more about the tools and instruments that worked best in case of Portugal so far. And I want to emphasize that it's good to have this sort of studies, and I'm really looking forward that this work stream would continue, and we would see more country cases in this work stream as well. So once again, os meus parabéns and muito obrigado.
Thank you. I see that Poland is kind of getting more fluently in Portuguese. That's very nice. Okay, I think I don't know if there are. Let me see if in the discussion if there are any further questions. Okay, I think because we are a bit tight now in terms of the timing and to wrap up this session, I'm giving the floor now to Sandrine and Stratos, and perhaps also Martin, if they would like to react to this very rich set of questions, comments, etc. Who starts? Sandrine, Stratos, or Martin?
I can start with a few words.
Okay, go ahead, Sandrine.
To break the ice.
Go ahead.
It's basically related to this question of absorptive capacity that is coming again and again. When we discuss about absorptive capacity, actually, we are also discussing about the capacity of SMEs to innovate. And innovate is a matter of knowledge accumulation. The more knowledge, codify or not codify, technological or not technological, but the more knowledge firms can absorb and integrate into its processes and product or services, the more innovative it could be. This is also a factor of inequality between firms, because those that are at the frontier are moving much faster than those that are lagging. So when we discuss absorptive capacity, we also, and we try to monitor and measure the absorptive capacity, we try to look at the capital that is already available within the SME sector, meaning it could be intangible capital with software and data. It could be technological capital, but mostly related currently with the digitalization and the digital adoption. And it could be a human capital, and this is about skills. And in the case of Portugal, what is striking in the story of Portugal, but Portuguese colleagues could tell the story much better than I do, is the leapfrog Portugal did in terms of upskilling the population, with a lot of investments that have been done in recent decades on educational program, PhD program, and developing science, technology, engineering, mathematics qualification of the young population. So I think it's a first element. Then regarding the question Daniela raised about what could be done regarding the microfirms, that's also a big issue. Because in the case of Portugal, what we see is this duality in the business population between these SMEs that are able to be innovative, to integrate international network, and a very large population of microfirms, which are low productive, and precisely we lack this absorptive capacity. So we have this gap in the business fabric. That is a challenge to address. I don't know if Martina and Stratos wants to add something.
I think in the interest of time, we can move on and see more comments from other participants.
You're muted, Joachim.
Oh, sorry. Is Daniela connected? She wants to add some comments. She's from Brazil, so Brazil is, of course, a very interesting case also in terms of this SME policy challenge. Do you want to? Yes, Danielle. Yes, go ahead. Daniela, you have the floor.
Thank you.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Well, thank you very much. This was indeed a very interesting study. Well, we have been following the project for a while, and I'm pretty much sure that despite the focus on Portugal, there's a lot of the insights are very useful for anyone who actually looking into this. In the case of Brazil, this is also a very important sector. I mean, they were responsible for, in the past years, for instance, despite the pandemic, to a great number of job creations and so on. So obviously, we're looking we're very interested in this. But actually, besides the questions of micro firms, which is also a reality in Brazil, plus the informality, which always very complicated in terms of how to improve productivity. I was wondering whether also the dynamics or the methodology would also take a look into the linkage also with domestic firms or multinationals that operate mostly in domestic market, which is in the case of Brazil, due to our historical economic formation, is most the case. I mean, Brazil historically is known to not necessarily being very integrated in the global value chains, but then there's a dynamic domestic markets where multinationals operated a lot. So I mean, this linkage could be very useful as well. So I wonder whether you had the opportunity also to look into that, because the focus of the studies for obvious reasons was the global value chains, but then there is this part of the internal dynamics here. So if you could just elaborate a little bit, thank you very much.
Thank you, Daniela. I think there is also Milena who would like to raise quickly a question before we wrap up. Milena, you are connected? Milena Rajkowska?
Yes.
Yes, go ahead. Go ahead, Milena.
Yes, thank you. I don't think I have the video options here because I'm like connected like something like audience, but that's perfectly okay. I have met some of you in real life, so it's a pleasure to be here again. So I am coming from DG Reform, which is the other Director General of Commissioner Ferreira. And of course, we are very much involved in Portugal, and together with Oecd, we are working together. As Catherine from DG Regio mentioned earlier, we are starting a new project on the impact of regulation on international investments in Portugal. So this is, we're going to be looking at the opportunities for structural reforms. So we'll be working again with the OECD and with the colleagues in Portugal. It will be a little bit of continuation of the work that you're doing now. And we have also two more interventions. One is going to be on the statistical information for better regulation. Of course, it's very much for a link to the creation of a better business environment. And the other one on microdata for the understanding better the productivity. It's again with Portugal, but this time we bring the partners also from Germany, France, and wider Europe. So my question is, what are the things, so to the authors of the report, what are the things that have surprised you? What is it that you saw that and you didn't expect? Because clearly some of the things are repeated messages. It's always good to reinforce them. It's always good to support them with more data. It's always good to wave them in front of the policymakers who actually have in their power to take action. But is there something that surprised you, something that we in DG Reform can take further in our actions, in our interventions in Portugal? Thank you very much.
Interesting question. Surprises. I think Martin would like to address the question by Daniela. Martin?
Sure, thanks a lot. Yeah, thanks everyone for the really great interventions. Yes, thanks for the question, Daniela. In the chat, I think you had a question on the role of microfirms and the extent to which they can connect, and then the question on the extent FDI actually links to the domestic economy. And actually, indeed, a big chunk of the focus is on GVCs in general terms, as we know it, through trader interactions. But really, the focus in this study is also really about the domestic interactions between foreign affiliates and domestic firms and domestic SMEs. And I think also to respond a little bit to the question that Joachim, you had in terms of like, what is the role of these big multinationals and then how they link? I think it's a similar question. And I think we need to be aware that a lot of FDI is coming into countries with big affiliates, and at some moment they come because there is either a market or a market has very good conditions for production. And I think within Europe, Portugal has very high skills, but still fairly lower, comparatively lower labor market costs and conditions. So it's a very good place for firms that want to produce in Europe to produce in Europe. So I think that was one big reason why car firms or other companies would go to Portugal. I think then the question is like how much the domestic economy can link and benefit from it. I think in Portugal, we see a lot of interactions with SMEs, and precisely because they have good skills and good capacities to be suppliers to these companies. But I think it is important to note that in the end, for these type of interactions, it remains a small space among the very big space of SMEs that can actually benefit. So I think the role, thinking about the role of FDI for more micro firms, for the big chunk of micro firms, including in Portugal, that have lower productivity, is yet another question. And I think we need to continue thinking like, yeah, what role FDI would really have for those firms, or are we more in the space of upgrading those firms that do already have quite advanced capacities. I may stop here, but if others react to Milena's questions, and otherwise I can come back on that one as well.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you so much. The question of Milena about surprises, I don't know. This is kind of an open question. Actually, I don't know if I was surprised, but I think it's this good news about the fact that indeed, when you take this SME sector in Portugal, you find actually a stronger intensity of technology adoption and internationalization than in other countries. I think this I don't know if this is a surprise, but for me at least was a very good news, because indeed so often we have this kind of view about the Portuguese economy, which a very strong, still traditional specialization, very strong dependence on this pure price competitiveness. So I think this, for me, was a sort of a good surprise, let's say. Let's put it like that. Sandrine, do you want to say something very quickly, and then I give the floor for the wrapping session, Sandrine, or that's
from my perspective, where I was surprised is the intensity of efforts done by the government on building strategic partnership between FDI and SMEs, because I didn't expect such an emphasis.
So it's a good institutional news, a surprise. Okay. No, this of course is very important. This is extremely important. No, I think this is highlights indeed the value of this type of analysis, because very often people have these preconceived views about countries, about sectors, and about policies, and I think this is really the value added of this kind of OECD analysis. Thank you so much to all. I think now it's time to wrapping up, and I would like to give the floor first to Celine Kaufmann. So Celine is the head of the Entrepreneurship, SMEs and Tourism Division of the OECD Center for Entrepreneurship, SMEs, Regions and Cities. So Celine is the head of the division where the study was mainly developed. And then I will give the floor to Anna Novik. Anna is head of the Investment Division of the OECD Directorate for Financial and Enterprise Affairs. I know that Anna get up very early because she's in Chile now, I say, from what I understood. So Celine, you have the floor.
Well, thank you very much, Joachim, an excellent job of chairing the session, and many thanks to all for the excellent discussion, and also for the great cooperation to produce this seminar work, both across different policy communities, with the Commission, with Portugal, excellent cooperation, and an excellent product at the end of that. I think it was mentioned several times, but obviously that topic of the FDI SME linkages is a very important topic for the new Committee on SME and Entrepreneurship at the OECD, in particular in the perspective of the recovery and the Build Back Better, as was mentioned earlier. And for me, there are two reasons for that, and you'll see it ties very much with the discussion we just had, but with a slight different perspective, putting the SMEs at the center of the discussion. For me, the first reason of why that topic is very important is that we know that FDI does not occur in a vacuum. The type and level of FDI that a specific location can attract depends on the quality of its local SME fabric and entrepreneurial ecosystem, which is itself influenced by factors such as regional and local infrastructure, the quality of services, the framework conditions, and so on. So here, we are typically at the interface of three policy areas, calling on different policy communities: investment, SME and entrepreneurship, and regional development. And of course, this raises complexity in understanding the policy mix, both across areas, but also across levels of government. But that I see as being actually at the heart of what OECD does best when it comes to policy advice. So right place for that discussion, definitely. The second point I wanted to make of why that topic is important, and again, maybe a slight change in perspective, is that in OECD countries, and it ties to a question we had, I think, from Daniela in terms of the linkages within a country and within the business community. In OECD countries, SMEs represent over 90% of the business population. And in the case of Portugal, we know it's more than 99% of the business population. So in effect, when we talk about FDI diffusion, the quality of the SME and entrepreneurship fabric and related policies is not only a critical component of the attractiveness of places for FDI, it also influences the quality of the FDI diffusion process locally. And typically, not only the capacity to support local innovation and productivity, but also the spillovers on employment, on gender equality, or the transition to the carbon net zero. So here we're talking about sound SME and entrepreneurship policies to ensure that the FDIs that hit the ground will have the diffusion effects that are expected. And of course, that linkages between SMEs and FDI will be therefore key to achieve the contemporary policy objectives that are related to digitalization, and we heard that are related to the twin transition in the EU in particular. So this intricacy of SME policy and investment, innovation, industrial and local development policy is for us one of the reasons why the OECD is developing an OECD strategy on SMEs and entrepreneurship, with a view to better reflect the various populations of business in policy making across policy areas and across sectors. And you'll see the draft of that SME and entrepreneurship strategy coming your way in a couple of weeks, for your feedback and comments. And because I know we're running out of time, let me finish by highlighting that, again, it's only the beginning of the journey. This is a pilot for which Portugal has been a pioneer country. So thank you very much again. And phase 2 will go a step further in identifying how SME and FDI policies can be better articulated and help countries and regions build more sustainable and resilient global value chains. And on our side, the SME side, I really look forward to continuing this journey with you and for what I see as being a very innovative project. Back to you, Joachim.
Thank you so much, Celine. And also thank you for highlighting this important creation of the OECD Committee on SMEs. I think this is a very important institutional move. Now, Anna, you have the final words.
Yeah.
Please go ahead.
No, I have been following all the meeting. I don't want to spend too much time because I think that everything has been done already and has been said. But I want to thank particularly the Jose Pedro Salgado, who has led the task force and the task force, because as Jose said, I think that this kind of task force, the process that we built here has been meaningful by itself, because to linking institution, as was mentioned during the seminar, has been an important part of the result of this review. Also thanks the teams, Stratos, Martins, and Rin, they have been working really hard, and also Jenny for the regional part on this work. I just want to say that I'm also looking forward. I think that it's very, very interesting to mix communities here, and we are mixing communities here because we know that the future is not just looking the FDI, in particular in the case of investment, that we want to make quality impact here, and then is how to link better with other communities. And I think that we are building this communities. Its director is working at the OECD, but also in countries. And in the mixing this community has been very interesting, I would say, insights, and then trying to link these two issues and SMEs, regional and investment. Also, I think that we are lucky, and I want to thank the European Union, DG Regio, to have this kind of follow-up. We have the Slovak pilot review that we will also launch, and also the final package of this phase 1. And also, as Celine mentioned, we will have the chance to continue working and going in depth, and also working with other countries in the second phase. And also, as Milena mentioned, we are doing something on the regulatory part on FDI, and we will link also this work with our work there. The final issue that I want to highlight here is that for us, this is also important because we are working to deliver on the next ministerial, the FDA quality recommendation, and this element that we are discussing right now will be an important part of that. And I want to thank all the participants and for the support and for the rich engagement here that will also fit this kind of work. And with that, I don't want to spend more time, but I really appreciate and enjoying a lot this session today. And also, it was a pleasure to work with Portugal. Really, it's a seriousness, engagement, and with the DG region from the EU. Thank you, Joaquin, also for your leadership here, moderating all this session.
No, thank you, Anna. Thank you for these final words. So I think so it's time to conclude. Thank you so much. Thank you to all. Thank you to the Minister, Siza Vieira. Thank you for our Deputy Secretary. I still say our, like I was still in the OECD. The Deputy Secretary General of the OECD, of course, the great OECD team, all the members of the Portuguese government, the Inter-Ministerial task team. At the end, what makes the quality of these OECD reports, and this is the quality of this cooperation between the OECD and, of course, the local authorities and the government. So thank you so much to all. I think this is a very rich, lively, and interesting session. And keep safe. And I hope we will meet one of these days soon at the OECD in this beautiful conference center that actually I miss a lot. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.